Hello guys and welcome to this tutorial. In this tutorial I'm going to show you um, linear gradients. Okay, I'm going to talk about linear gradients. It's a CSS property that enables us to use two colors on like a background color or something like that, and it will be such that it will blend from one color to the other. So let's just get real practical right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly write a markup. So I have this example.html. Okay, so I'll just use my emmet to generate a boilerplate for HTML, and then I'll just quickly create a header. Okay, so I'll create a header with a class of header, and then within this class I'm going to create a div with a class of header, and I'll say text box hyphen box. Okay, and then maybe I'll create another div. So I would say I'll create a div with a class of heading, and then within this I'll create a h1 tag. I'm just going to say this is a div. Okay, and then I'll save this. So let me just open this in the browser. So this is a simple div. This is what I just created in my HTML. So let's go back and see how we can add some styles. So within I'm going to use um, internal style, internal CSS. So I would say style, that's within the head tag, and then within this style tag, opening and closing tag, I'm going to write my CSS. So the first thing I want to target is the header, right? So I'm going to say dot header, and then within this header I'm going to start specifying some properties. Now the first property I'll specify is the height of the header, and I'll say I want the height to be 90%, okay, of the viewport height, and then I'll save. Okay, so if I refresh the page now, we're not going to notice any difference, okay, because the background of the header is transparent really. But now let's see how we can add our gradients properties. So to add a color gradient to the header, what we need to do is we need to specify the background image. Okay, and for this background image, I'm going to give this property a value of linear gradient, and I'll say hyphen. So my text editor is already showing me linear gradient. Okay, all right, so now what I'll do is I'm going to say that I want this gradient to go to from left to the right. Okay, so I'll just say to right. Okay, and I'll add a comma, and then I'll specify the color. Okay, so I want two colors on my header background. So what I'll say now is RGBA. I'll use the RGBA notation, okay, which stands for red, green, blue. Okay, and then the A is for the transparency. So I would put this in a bracket, and then I'll add some value. So I want to start from green. Okay, so I already have the colors I want to use. I'm just going to paste it in. So this is the color I want to use. I want it within this RGBA, so I'm going to paste it in, and then I would say I want the transparency to be 0.80. Okay, so this is the first color I just specified. So I need to specify the second color. Okay, so the second color I'm also going to use RGBA notation, and then I'll put my values in a bracket. I also have the values I want to use for this, so I'll just copy and paste. So this is the value I want to use. Yeah, and then I would also specify that I want the transparency to be 0.8. Okay, so at this point I can go ahead and save. All right, So let's see what our page looks like. And as you can see, we have this background image that starts from green over here, and then as it comes to the right, towards the right, the color changes to the color we specified. Now let me show you a few things here. Okay, so first off, I'm going to add some universal styles and say that I want my padding to be 0, and I also want my margin also to be 0, and then I want my, well, I think this is enough for now since I'm not really doing much on this page. Okay, so remember we set our linear gradient to move from left to right, but you know what, we can also set it to from right to left. Okay, but we're not going to do that. What I want to do now is I'm going to set it from right, and then I also want it to go to the bottom. Okay, now I'll save and then I'll refresh the page, and as you can see, the color, changes from right and then towards, from left and then towards the right and the bottom. And when you come to the bottom, we have the second color we specified at the bottom. So that's how you apply linear gradients to like a background image on your web page or something like that. Okay, so next, let's see how we can center a div within this section here. So I'll go to my code, and remember we have a div, okay, within the header, and the div has a class of header text box, right? Good. Now let's see how we can center this div. So what will happen is um, I'm gonna say dot header hyphen text and box, and then I'm going to say something like, okay, before I center this div, I think I want to add an image right here. Okay, so I want to add an image to a background image to this linear gradient. So what I'll do is I'll come here and I'll say something like, okay, let me make this a bit smaller. Okay, so right here I'm going to leave a space, and then I'll say URL. Okay, so I have an image, so I'm just going to specify the image, and that's okay. So it's in a folder called images, and then / yeah, 3.jpg. So I'll save and show you what it looks like. So let's just see. Okay, so I think I did something wrong. What did I do wrong? Okay, I was supposed to add a comma here, so I'll add a comma there, and I would save and refresh the page. Okay, so we have an image right here. All right, so let's add some properties to the image, and we're going to say something like, let's do the background position. So I'll do the background position to top, and basically what this means is that if the size of the browser changes, the top part of the image remains constant. So if I attempt to reduce the size of my browser, notice that the top part of the image remains constant. Okay, so as I resize the browser, see, so that's what that means. So I'll set the background position to top, and then I'll set the background size. Okay, so I have it here, and I'll set it to cover so that it occupies the full viewport available. And then, okay, so let's come to our text box and see how we can center it, right? So before we center this text box, I'm going to add some properties to the heading. So what I'll do is I'll say something like dot heading, and I would say I want a border, and basically I want a border of 2px, and I want it solid, and I want it to be white, so that will be hash fff. And then I also want the color, so color of the text, I want it also to be white. And then I'll save. Let's see what we have. Yeah, so we have this div with this very long border, but what we want essentially, we want, want to change this display from block to inline block. So it's a div, it's a block element, right? So I'm just going to set the display to inline block. And then what that does is that it's, only takes up the, essentially it's a block element that behaves like an inline element, so it only takes up the space it needs, right? All right, so now let's see how we can center it using the absolute positioning trick. So basically what I got to do is I got to say position, and I'll set it to absolute. But remember that when you set a position to absolute, essentially we're setting the position for this div with a class of header text box to absolute. All right, but when you set a position to absolute, it needs a reference. Okay, so it's absolute positioning in reference to something. Okay, so I'm going to make this header the reference, and basically what I got to do is I got to set the position of the header to relative. Okay, so the header text box uses this dot header class as a reference to position itself. So what I got to do is I got to say from the left I want it to be 50%, and I'll say from the right, sorry, I'll say from the top, okay, I also want it to be 50%, and I'll save. Now if I refresh the page, essentially you see that it moved this particular div, but it's not centered. Okay, now to complete our centering, what we got to do is we got to say, we got to add a property, and that property is transform. And basically what we want to do is we want to translate. Okay, and we got to set some properties here. So I'll say minus 50%. Okay, and I'll add a comma, and I'll also say minus 50%. So essentially we are repositioning this div, we are offsetting the position so that it displays exactly in the middle. Okay, that's horizontally speaking. Now if I save and I go back to my browser, when I refresh, watch what happens. So I'm going to refresh the page, and as you can see, it's centered here. Okay, so now if I resize this shape here, you see it's still centered, it stays in the center. Okay, so let's just open this up, and let's show you one more trick here. Okay, so what I'm going to show you is how to use the clip path property. Okay, so for the third trick for today, let's use the clip path property, and essentially I'm going to use a tool. So basically let me go to my browser, and I'll use a tool by this guy Bennett Philly. Okay, and let me just open the website. So first off, I'll just say bennettphilly.com. So this is the very great guy that's helped us with our clip path tool. So basically I got to scroll down and I'll look for his tool. So this is the tool here, Clippy. So if I click on this, it will reload and go to this particular tool. So essentially what this tool does is that, or what this CSS property does is that it clips out a section of your it clips out a part of a particular section on your website. So basically I'm just going to click on the trapezoid, for example, and then I'll just extend this. All right, now supposing I wanted to clip out a part of, let's say, the right aspect of that section on my website, I just got to raise this up to whatever percent. So if I say maybe 85%, I'll just drag it down. And what I'll do next is I'll copy this code here, and then I'll just do Control C, or basically let's go back to our code editor. Now within the header section, I'll come here and then I'll paste that code. So essentially it's the clip path property, and the is set to polygon, and then the values are set within it. Okay, now let me save this and show you what it looks like on the page. So I'll go back to the page and I'll refresh the page, and as you can see, it has clipped out a portion of this header section. Yeah, so basically you can use this property any way you want to design your web page. Okay, it's a modern feature in CSS, and some people have used it very nicely on their websites. So that's what we have for you on our CSS tips and tricks today. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. Do subscribe to my channel. See you in another one.